Hello, everyone, and welcome to that episode of Todd Talks. When Todd talks, people listen. Godzilla! I'm just kidding. Honestly, I mean, I would hope Godzilla is not out there. It would ruin my Wednesday, that's for sure, and definitely paint Illinois in a very different light. I'm just saying. No, but today we are previewing the death battle between Dragonzord and MechaGodzilla, aka Kiru, because there's been multiple MechaGodzillas in the past. Anyway, but I'm very excited for this battle because I'm not the biggest Godzilla fan. I mean, I've seen the movies. I saw the recent one that came out. I'm sorry, I saw the 2014 one that came out, and it was good. And I'll eventually see King of the Monsters, but Power Rangers was my jam as a kid. I actually still have the original Dragon Dagger from that time period. I didn't get to bring it because it's at my parents' house because they still hold some of my child toys. But I will, if I find it, I promise I will bring it to the reaction video should Dragonzord win. So this one was very interesting to research because there was lots of data on certain characters and yet not a lot of data on other characters. So you'll see what I mean when I get going. Starting off with the Dragonzord. So a long time ago, Rita Repulsa was in a battle with Zordon, a galactic warrior, and it basically ended up in a stalemate. Zordon was trapped in a time warp, and Rita was put into a galactic recycling bin for 10,000 years. Sure enough, Rita was freed by some very idiot astronauts. What are you gonna do? You see something on the moon, you gotta open it up. Anyway, um, I just like I always wondered what happened to those astronauts, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Actually, I think they explained it in the comics. Never mind. So anyway, so Rita goes on her rampage on Earth, and the Zordon summons the Power Rangers, five teenagers with attitudes, and a new war basically begins. But over time, Rita realizes that the Power Rangers are both too strong, too good, and none of her uh, monsters created by Finster are enough to defeat them. So what does she do? She decides to even the playing field because she just happened to have a power coin of her own, the green power coin, which she infused with evil and basically brainwashed Tommy Oliver into being her servant slash warrior. And he went to work basically just wrecking the Power Rangers until eventually he was freed. But while he could do this on his own, they obviously had the Megazord. And so he needed a Zord of his own, which he did via the Dragonzord. The Dragonzord is 90 meters tall and 170 tons in weight, which is pretty good. And it's on par with the Megazord. And in fact, it was known multiple times to tie the Megazord in power and durability, as well as beat it in certain scenarios. It also has beaten the Tigerzord, which I'll get to a little bit later. And with this very powerful mech, Rita had many victories under her belt, and the Dragonzord kept coming back even after, Tommy was kind of depowered. It was able to be summoned by the other Rangers, which will be a key point later on. And one of the reasons it was so deadly was because not only was it tall and heavy, it had a lot of weapons. It had finger missiles. It had lasers it could fire out of its chest. It could shoot fireballs. It could fly, though I'm not exactly sure I remember it doing that. It was on a wiki, so I guess it must be true. And but it could fight underwater because it's actually underwater most of the time. The original design of the Dragonzord was actually meant to be a reference to Godzilla, including it rising out of the water, not unlike how Godzilla did in all the old uh, movies, Toho movies. So that's a little bit of a fun trivia right there. And then in terms of combat, it is actually very well adept for close range fighting, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And it would go toe to toe with the Megazord and lots of Rita and Zed's monsters over the course of the series. Now, in regards to Tommy, Tommy is arguably okay, he is the greatest Power Ranger to ever live. But in terms of when he was the Green Ranger and then the White Ranger, he was arguably the best fighter on the team, second maybe only to Jason Lee Scott, the original Red Ranger. And he would pilot the Dragonzord one of two ways. He would use his Dragon Dagger, which he could give vocal commands via the flute sounds, which I saw a meme recently, which was it was Tommy playing the flute, and he goes, "The moment you realize that the flute is playing a sound, despite uh, it not being pressed up to his lips, nor air coming out of the helmet. He's not wrong. All right. But apparently, and I honestly forgot this for a while, there is a cockpit in the Dragonzord. And that means that while Tommy can control it remotely, he can go into the Dragonzord to pilot it more directly, and apparently he has even greater control over the Dragonzord when he does that. He doesn't do it often. He's only shown like a few times in the show, but it is there. And if you watch the trailer for the battle that was shown at RTX recently, we are going to see Tommy in the cockpit. So that means that he will be in there, and he will either die with the Dragonzord, which he did with the Tigerzord, or he'll, have a victory, there. So, now, one of the interesting things about Dragonzord is while it does have a large fighting history per se, it honestly doesn't have too many appearances in the show. And because of that, its battle record isn't as impressive as you might think. Mainly because it's never summoned. Okay, during the Green with Evil storyline and certain other storylines that came across later, the Dragonzord never was summoned as the first line of offense, all right, against monsters outside of when it battled the Megazord in the Green with Evil storyline, all right? So I think I just contradicted myself, but in Green with Evil, it was summoned to mainly fight the Megazord, and it beat the Megazord multiple times. But when Tommy was on their side, or the other Rangers had the ability to summon Dragonzord themselves, it was never summoned as a first line of offense. It was always a support character, if you will. It would help them in battle, and there was one time they showed in the Death Battle preview, it actually cut through a cocoon that the Megazord itself could not get out of. And then, of course, it would help them with their various transformations that would give the Megazord extra power and abilities. So, even though it clearly has the power to destroy a lot of monsters, it technically hasn't destroyed too many themselves. One of the most famous times it did destroy something on its own was when it basically one-shot the Tigerzord, which is feasible, but there were other circumstances involved with that, including Tommy not being at full power when he piloted the Tigerzord, and then the Dragonzord being infused with evil, which technically it already was, so take that as you will. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean it hasn't destroyed monsters on its own. It's just, usually it's used in a support capacity, which is interesting because one of its best transformations that it can do is Dragonzord Battle Mode. In it, it combines with the Mastodon, the Pterodactyl, the Mastodon Triceratops, and the Saber-toothed Tigerzords in order to go into a more battle-like formation in which it transforms more in the line of the Megazord, the regular Megazord, and it has a spear drill, which is really, really cool. Now, can Tommy use this? Yes and no. Yes, he can summon all the other Zords. He's proven this in the past with the Tigerzord, and the other Rangers have been able to summon the Dragonzord. And so, technically speaking, because this would be the good Tommy Oliver, he would be able to summon the other Zords. Now, in the past, we saw with Tigerzord that Death Battle did allow him to do this. But then in the Power Rangers versus Voltron battle, they restricted them to not do it because it honestly would have been pointless anyway, but they wanted to have the original Zords. So technically speaking, he can summon the other Zords to become Dragonzord Battle Mode, which could add another layer to the spike. Whether they actually do that is uncertain. They tease that they're going to reveal this in the next Death Battle cast, which for me is tomorrow because I don't have Rooster Teeth first. So I'm leaving that open-ended so where it could happen, but it might not. I don't know. In the trailer, they don't show it, but they also likely wouldn't show it because that would be teasing, and that would be possibly revealing the ending. So take that as you will. But regardless, Dragonzord is one of the coolest Zords ever. It was so enduring that remember the Tigerzord episode that I keep mentioning? That actually didn't happen in the Super Sentai series. They loved the Dragonzord so much and they loved Tommy Oliver so much that they actually created an episode where it was Green Ranger versus White Ranger, and then they had the Dragonzord versus the Tigerzord. Though they didn't fight in the original series, they actually had to splice footage together and cut it in such a way that it would actually have these two Zords fight each other. That's how legendary the Dragonzord is. And so to have him in a death battle, the third Power Ranger in a death battle with the Tigerzord and the Megazord, that's pretty cool. And that shows its legacy. Speaking of legacy, Godzilla. Godzilla, of course, was the savior slash destroyer of Japan. And throughout the early movie series, he was seen as one of the major threats to the world, so much so that a scientist actually killed him via an oxygen deprivation bomb, which is actually really clever when you think about it, but let's hope we never make that ourselves. So about 50 years later, surprise, Godzilla lives. But it's not the original Godzilla that they killed all those decades ago. Instead, it's a brand new Godzilla, because why the heck not? But at this point, Japan has had so much battles with kaiju and the memory of the original Godzilla that they set up their own Japanese Special Defense Force, or the JSDF. And they decided that they needed to bring the greatest minds of Japan together to not just make a savior for themselves, but one that could rival Godzilla should he return, which he did. And thus was born MechaGodzilla. Now again, there's been many MechaGodzillas over the history of Toho, but the one we're talking about today is Kiryu, piloted by Akane. Well, one of those two. And they didn't say the name of the death battle preview, so I don't know how they say it. It's Akane or Akane, whatever. So MechaGodzilla was literally designed to not just be a massive mecha warrior. It was designed to be a Godzilla killer, or at least attempt to kill Godzilla. And in its first battle with it, it was actually so strong enough to get a draw with the king of the monsters, which is pretty impressive for a first try. Actually, I take that back. The first time Godzilla used a roar and actually woke up Godzilla within MechaGodzilla, because plot twist, MechaGodzilla is built over the bones of the original Godzilla from 50 years previously. And the spirit of Godzilla, the original Godzilla, is still in the bones of MechaGodzilla, which means that it can still technically awaken and resist the creature, or sorry, resist control via Akane or whoever is controlling MechaGodzilla at the time, which has proven a key storyline in multiple movies and other Godzilla-related events. So, but after its first failure, it was made so that it technically couldn't do that again. It did, and in its rematch, it fought to a stalemate and actually critically wounded Godzilla, which in its third fight it would exploit and basically take Godzilla down, which is very impressive. Just as impressive as its large amount of weaponry. I mean, MechaGodzilla was, again, built to kill Godzilla. And so they needed the power to take down a kaiju that cannot just destroy Japan, but has, again, atomic breath, could channel electricity, has a healing factor, has two brains, one in its head and one in where its tail meets its torso, which basically means its butt, and so on and so forth. That's not an easy task, especially when you technically don't know the upper limits of Godzilla, which, if you recall the Godzilla versus Gamera death battle, Godzilla's freaking powerful. So, yeah. Now, in terms of weaponry, it has much of what you might call typical weaponry from a Japanese movie perspective. It has lasers via maser cannons, which reminds me of Bucky O'Hare, because that's what they called it on the Righteous Indignation. And it has rocket launchers. It has various kinds of missiles that it can do. It has a hidden blade, which can deliver electricity shocks to, which apparently really hurts Godzilla, even though he could channel electricity, which is weird. You know, writers, what are you going to do? And yes, I know I am one. So it's got that, but then it's also got a rocket pack that can not just help it fly, but it can actually bend over and launch it at Godzilla, which was enough to knock it down upon only getting hit by half of it. So, and Godzilla is pretty freaking huge himself. So, if I recall correctly, Godzilla weighs about 90,000 tons. MechaGodzilla is about 40,000 metric tons. So, you know, about the same. I mean, it's lighter than Godzilla, but still, it's a pretty heavy machine. So, And then its absolute best attack is the Absolute Zero, a freezing laser blast that allows it to basically freeze opponents instantly and apparently drain the energy from them, which is a curious thing that I'll get to a little bit later in regard to how it might affect the Dragonzord. Now, it's defined as its most powerful weapon, even though, technically speaking, against Godzilla, it didn't do jack. Or it did so little that it had to use its other weapons in conjunction with Absolute Zero to win. And then win a year later. And even then, when you use the Absolute Zero, it actually drains a heavy portion of MechaGodzilla's batteries, which is one of the most important things, because while MechaGodzilla is incredibly powerful, one of its biggest weaknesses is that it has a power supply, unlike Dragonzord, but I'll get to that later. And if it uses the Absolute Zero, it heavily drains its battery to the extent that if it is used in battle, the pilot or whoever is controlling MechaGodzilla only has about a 2-hour time limit to use MechaGodzilla and win the battle, else it'll run out of power, which would be bad. So, now, the pilot of MechaGodzilla, the most famous pilot of MechaGodzilla, is Akane, who has a very interesting history herself. She was a part of... her parents were killed when she was young, and she actually felt she was a mistake and didn't deserve to live, which is very Japanese. And she eventually joined the Japanese Special Defense Force, but via an accident actually got some of her co-workers killed by knocking them into Godzilla. Oops. And so she was demoted to a librarian until eventually she was brought back up into the Special Force to peck MechaGodzilla. Now, to pilot MechaGodzilla. And she became not just one of the fan favorite characters of the movie and series that she was in, but she became basically the pilot for MechaGodzilla that everyone remembers and honors, and etc., etc. Although that's apparently where her history ends. She comes back a little later, but then is replaced as the pilot for MechaGodzilla. I don't know why. I looked at like 3 different wikis on her. I can't find much on her. It's really weird. But with Akane, MechaGodzilla was able to defeat not just many kaiju, which they tease in the Death Battle preview, but she was able to defeat Godzilla in the 3rd matchup, where she used a rotating hand drill, or drills, where have I heard that before, and pierced the wound that the Absolute Zero did make on MechaGodzilla, and was able to use that in conjunction with their new full power Maser cannons, which replaced Absolute Zero after the first one, because it was not cost effective. And she was able, with help of Mothra of all things, to contain Godzilla and then send him back to the ocean's depths where they felt they belong. In fact, Akane actually is in such conjunction with MechaGodzilla and the spirit of the original Godzilla that she realizes that the original Godzilla's bones doesn't want to kill Godzilla. They just want it to, return it to the sea so that another one of its kin would not die. So, very heartwarming. Alright, so usually at this point, or at this point in my research, I should say, after I got done with researching Akane, which is the last thing I researched, I would have a better scope of how this battle would go. And I admit I've had some trouble in the past, like Lucy Carnage and Ben 10, Green Lantern. I thought Alien X was obviously going to win. Jin Ryu. There are these times where the stats just don't line up in certain aspects, and it makes me wonder what's going to happen. Because if we're just comparing the mechs themselves, all right, the Dragonzord is taller by about, let's see, they said 30 meters. That's about 100 feet. So it's about 100 feet taller than MechaGodzilla. But MechaGodzilla is like 20,000 times heavier? I don't get that. I mean, how is it that small and that heavy, and yet the Dragonzord is that tall and that light? I don't get it. And if you recall Godzilla versus Gamera, one of the reasons that Godzilla won was because he was just so gosh dang heavy and hard to move. However, it's been noted that the Power Rangers, the Megazord, was once able to punch a monster weighing about 10,000 pounds up into the air about 100 feet. Now, granted, if we're using the same math that technically means it would be able to knock a 40,000-pound creature off its feet to a certain degree. So I have no doubt that the Dragonzord can hurt a 40,000-pound monster, and it's very probable that it has in the past. But the weight issue is somewhat concerning. What's more, there is no doubt in my mind that MechaGodzilla has a wider arsenal of weapons than the Dragonzord. Between its maser cannons, its missiles, its jetpack, its absolute zero, the quadra-powered maser cannon, etc., the hidden blades and everything, the drill hand, and all that. I think at most the Dragonzord has like 6 weapons on it, which the MechaGodzilla has about 10, give or take, depending on the model. And so that's a slight advantage. But here's the twist here. All right, first of all, we got to talk pilots. Okay, there's no doubt that Tommy has more experience piloting Dragonzord than Akane has with MechaGodzilla. That's a key factor. And because of how he controls Dragonzord, he can control him remotely with good control, or go into the cockpit with greater control. And when that happens, that technically makes him the Dragonzord a much better combatant, and that's important to note. Also, the styles of the Dragonzord and the MechaGodzilla are different. MechaGodzilla is meant for distance combat, while Dragonzord is actually well adept at both distance and close range combat. And in fact, it prefers at times close range combat because it's actually got impressive speed itself, which again, with its lighter frame, it technically would be faster than MechaGodzilla, although MechaGodzilla has been proven to be quite agile, dodged the atomic breath of Godzilla multiple times, can fly, and just straight up dodge things. But then again, so has the Megazord, which the Dragonzord has beaten, and so has the Tigerzord, which the Dragonzord has beaten. So also, the Dragonzord has beaten countless, or helped beat countless monsters that could easily destroy the planet, including the Megazord, or sorry, again, it has beaten the Megazord, but the Megazord has also defeated monsters that could easily destroy the planet. So in this case, you really have to scale MechaGodzilla to Godzilla and Dragonzord to the Megazord, and then see who could beat who. And that's where the problem comes in, because there's no doubt that I think the Dragonzord could take on Godzilla, but whether it could beat it is another story. What's more, MechaGodzilla was designed to face flesh and blood kaiju, not a mechanized monstrosity that is the Dragonzord. Okay, so like most of its weapons are meant to hurt flesh, not metal. And even though the Megazord has been known to drain of energy, the Dragonzord has no such problems. It's stated that its stamina is limitless, unlike the Megazord, which has a battery limit and then usually has to call the power sword to recharge it. Though obviously I could be mistaken, but based on my knowledge of the Dragonzord, it has never ran out of power. It's been beaten, but it's never ran out of power. So as you can see, there's a lot of conflicting information here. You know, does the height of the Dragonzord mean it can, you know, have both a leverage and a power advantage against MechaGodzilla, or does the MechaGodzilla's greater weaponry and surprising speed mean that it can outlast or outfight the Dragonzord? And how do the pilots figure into this? Because I think that the pilots would have a key factor of sorts into determining the winner. It's very complicated. So in that way, I am going to go totally biased, and I'm picking the Dragonzord, though I do have some basis for this. Okay, as noted, the Megazord has gone up against enemies that have weighed at least 10,000 pounds or more, and the Megazord did not weigh anywhere close to that. It's been stated as if you watched Megazord Voltron. So there's no doubt that the weight issue probably isn't as big a factor as it was with Gamera and Godzilla. So that's one thing. Two, the Dragonzord has been shown to be at times more powerful than the Megazord and the Tigerzord. And the Tigerzord is part of the Thunderzord line, which is supposed to be superior to the original Dinosaur line in every way. And yet it was able to beat it instantly, or, you know, pretty close to instantly. While they do have similar weapons, I think that because the Dragonzord was built to fight more planetary terrors than Godzilla, and I do think that some of the monsters that Power Rangers have fought are more powerful than Godzilla, and yet they beat him. It's it's really hard, but I do think that the Dragonzord just ekes out enough to win. I don't know if Dragonzord battle mode comes into this. I was picking Dragonzord anyway before I remember Dragonzord battle mode. And honestly, I don't even know how many times the Dragonzord battle mode has defeated monsters, which it has. I know it has. It uses its drill spear to do a finishing blow. But there's one more factor here that I think points to Tommy. As noted, Tommy can control the Dragonzord two different ways. Akane uses or manually pilots the MechaGodzilla. That's the best way to pilot it. There is a way to actually hurt the circuitry in the MechaGodzilla bot to make it so it doesn't respond to commands. So theoretically speaking, if Tommy / Dragonzord were to hit the right blow, it would be able to defeat MechaGodzilla just by making it so Akane couldn't pilot it, which would be huge. So with all of that being said, I am picking Tommy and Dragonzord to finally give Power Rangers a win in Death Battle. Okay, we lost to Gundam Epion. Fine. We lost to the Voltron. I said Voltron would win. We have to beat MechaGodzilla. I'm sorry, Ben. I will ruin your birthday because Ben's birthday is next week. And he wanted MechaGodzilla to win. But I will ruin your birthday. Dragonzord's going to win. Okay? Okay. So with that, I'm ending this episode of Todd Talk. Who do you think is going to win between Dragonzord and MechaGodzilla? And why do you think they will win? Let me know in the comments below. So, actually, I just, I almost did the podcast ending. I'm sorry, I do a podcast and that's how I ended. What I mean to say is, I thank you for watching. If you made this far, I know you were listening, and I will see you around.